Genesis 8, verse 21, where we see God's response to the sacrifice, the whole burnt offering that Noah offers when he comes off of the ark. And it's a very, very interesting verse. It's a long verse, quite complicated in terms of some of the vocabulary, but there's a lot of really cool stuff here. So let's take a look. Ke os franthe, Kyrios hatheos, osmain euodias, kai epen, Kyrios hatheos, dianoethes, ou prostheso eti tu katarasastai ten gain, dia ta ergaton anthropum. And we'll finish it up here in a few minutes. The kai, of course, just linking back to the prior verse, extending the narrative. First verb here is from osphreinomai. Notice this is going to be with that theta eta ending, lengthening on the front end, slight spelling change, dropping an I, and so forth. So third singular, aorist passive indicative. This means to smell. And who's the subject? Kyrios hot theos. So the Lord God smelled. Now, even though this is an aorist passive, it's really functioning as a middle here. That happens, of course, with some of those theta tense formatives. It's kind of borrowing or taking over the typical role in the middle. So the Lord God smelled. And in the Masoretic or in English Bibles from that, you'll typically just see the Lord as opposed to the Lord God. And so the hexapla will typically add theos here with that obelisk there to show that it's in the Greek but not in the Hebrew. So it's obelized. But the editors of the Old Greek tend to think that it does say Kyrios hot theos, so somehow they're adding it. That happens a lot, as we've seen in Genesis. And the Lord God here, as opposed to just the Lord. Now, what does he smell in osmain euodias? Now, osme here, you can probably even tell you got osphreino here, osme here. They're kind of related. This just means a smell or an aroma. So he smelled a smell. Now, what kind of smell is it? It's euodia. That's a fragrant smell. So he smelled a pleasing aroma or something to that effect. And then what does he do? He said, and notice once again the subject is Kyrios hatheos. Same issue as before. Your Masoretic is just going to have Lord, and the hexapla will obelize that hatheos. And we have a little modifier here, nice little adverbial participle from dia noeomai. And with that morphology, this is a nominative singular masculine because it's modifying the Kyrios hatheos, so it's going to match that. And it's an aorist passive participle. Now, dia noeomai typically means to think or to deliberate. The Hebrew has in his heart. So it's kind of an interesting slight difference here. So the Hebrew says, the Lord God said in his heart, trying to get at this. Of course, that's anthropomorphic language, trying to get at this. This is like an internal deliberation. The Old Greek just sort of makes it maybe a little bit more clear. It could be trying to distance itself from the heart language and make it more, in a sense, intangible. So the Lord God said, while deliberating or having deliberated, something to that effect. The basic outcome is the same, but I think that's it's a clever translation. I kind of like that. Now, what does he say? So negation here, prostheso. This is from prostithemi. And given that you have that theso ending, the theta is not an aorist passive or future passive. It's just part of the root form. It's a first singular future active indicative, hence the use of as opposed to may. That's normal. Eti here is again or yet again. So I will not. Now, what does prostithemi here mean? It can mean to add to, but this is more something like to do again. This is a pretty common thing in the Septuagint. It's trying to pick up on a particular type of phrasing in the Hebrew. And it's usually going to be buddied up with an infinitive. So these two words kind of function together. And kataraomai, which in this case is the aorist middle infinitive, means to curse. So the basic idea when you put it all together is, I will not again or yet again, something like that, curse, basically. That's the net effect. It's hard to kind of do it word for word because it's a bit of an idiom. So I will no longer again curse, and what will he not curse? The earth, on account of, dia here plus the accusative, the works of man or men or mankind, however you want to take that. So what's interesting is that this comment, and we'll see more here in a second, that he's no longer going to curse the earth again, something like that, because of the works of mankind, is really a response to him smelling this pleasing aroma. So Noah here, even though he's not a priest, obviously, he's prior to the priesthood, he's functioning in that kind of way. He has interceded on behalf of humanity. Now God, having smelled this pleasing aroma, is making this promise, this commitment, no longer to do this kind of judgment again. So it's a beautiful way to capture that. Let's continue then. Now, why is he no longer going to do this? Hati, enketai he dianoia to anthropu, Epimelos epi tapone ra ek neotetos. U prosthesoun, notice that phrasing again, eti pataxai, pasan sarkazosan, kathos epoiesa. So here is our explanation, hati, because. Now our verb here is ekkemai. Notice it's going to be a third singular present passive indicative. And that means to incline. So in this case, it's going to be something is inclined. Notice the passive form. Hey dianoia, that's the mind. So notice God has this sort of mental deliberation, if you will. Again, that's anthropomorphic language. Now we have humanity having this inclination. So in other words, the mind, and we see of man, is inclined. Now the Hebrew here has heart, and so but there's a pretty common tendency in the Septuagint to take the word lev, which is heart in Hebrew, and use either cardia, which is most common, or dianoia, which is mind. So the mind of man is inclined, and epimelos, that means continually, over and over again, always. You could even translate it. Now, if you look this up in your English Bible, you're not going to see that in this particular verse. It's not in the Masoretic. My guess is, and most scholars would argue, that the translator here has probably unintentionally borrowed this from Genesis 6:5. When God initially takes notice of the sinfulness of humanity and then brings the judgment, he says, once again, that the mind of mankind is epimelos epi tapone ra. Notice the use of epi tapone ra again here. So probably the translator's like, wait a second, it's supposed to have epimelos there, because we saw that in Genesis 6:5, even though it probably wasn't in the Hebrew. So that's what explains that. So he is, the mind of mankind is continually inclined upon evil things. Notice the plural there. Ek neotetos, that means from youth, from the very beginning, because we are conceived in sin due to the fall. And therefore, in light of this, in light of the fact that mankind has just always bent towards evil, God is almost, in one sense, saying, okay, I've judged the earth once through this flood. I'm not going to do it again, partly in light of Noah's substitutionary atoning sacrifice, but also because the mind of mankind is it's not going to change. It's always bent towards evil. And so a different kind of divine judgment, a different kind of intervention is going to be needed. In many respects, this is going to anticipate, obviously, the work of Jesus. Simply flooding the earth doesn't change the heart of man. Of course, it does satisfy the wrath of God. Of course, you have the sacrifice afterwards, but it doesn't fundamentally change us. And so what does God say? U prostheso, we saw that on sort of the prior view here. I will not again. Therefore, again, in response to all this bad stuff about mankind, we're not going to change our ways. Leopard doesn't change his spots. Eti, again, pataxai, now a different verb here. Patasa means to strike, to smite. Once again, another aorist active infinitive. So it's once more buddying up with this prostitheme. So I will not, or therefore, I will not again strike. Pasan sarka, all flesh, zosan here from zao. It's accused of singular feminine. Present active participle, so all living flesh, kathos epoiesa, as I did. Notice the third singular aorist active indicative, referring back, of course, to the prior chapters. So a lot of complicated stuff going on here, but the basic sense is this: because the mind or heart of man is continually inclined towards evil things from his youth, I will not again strike all living flesh as I had done previously. A different kind of divine intervention and judgment is needed, which I would argue is a very subtle way of anticipating the entire, not only sacrificial system of Israel, but fundamentally the climactic work of Christ. So, a lot of stuff here. Thanks for sticking around for a longish video, but it's a long verse. Hopefully you've enjoyed it.